Okay. Made the mistake of making noise and now my cat's purring. Uh-oh. Last time. Okay. I think that worked. Alright. So, we've got a lot to cover. So I should hop into it. And then I can eat. Probably gonna get halfway through this lesson, and I'm gonna be like, I'm so hungry. Why did I do this to myself? Um, but what? What? Really? Come here. Come on. Anyway, yeah. So I've got a couple of things that I'm going to talk about at the end. Um, hey Tori. But until then, um, let's jump into everything else. So you can see her ears right, right behind my head. Working from home, man. All right. So just get my lap, Otto. You're shedding so bad. Lay down. Just lay down. Quit moving around. Nope. Whatever. Okay. Choose what you're gonna do, cause I gotta get to work. So we talked about the what fascism was. Um, Typically led by military men from the Great War, um, as people were willing to give up their freedoms as long as they had some amount of stability. And again, I can't use my book because the cat's laying on it. How about if I took my book away from you and put it in my lap? What do you think? Lay in my lap? Is that what it's gonna take? You jerk. All right. Where's Tori? Tori. Hey. 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 Whatever. Okay. She's a good girl. Oh, I can't do that. That was a bad idea. Okay, um, once fascists came to power, they would push past any kind of democratic means to get things done. Um, and often the people were happy with that. They were seen as, you know, pushing out the old ways and doing what they had to do, and all that good stuff. Uh, Now, the third Communist International, and we had seen the first and the second. Now we've got the third. This is the Comintern. Sent agents out to spread the ideals of communism. I'm not able to talk today. Apologies. Communism around the world. Um, and both communist and fascist nations were very expansionist. So, as I mentioned last time, once again, I got ahead of myself, so you'll have to excuse me. Um, while they both were opposed to democracy and capitalism, they were much more opposed to one another. Uh, we always see, oh, well, communism and fascism are over there and we're over here, but realistically, communism's over here and fascism's over here, and we're kind of in the middle uh, with democracy and capitalism. Uh, Communism on the far left saw class as your defining factor, overriding the national, ethnic, and religious differences. So again, in their perfect world, there really wouldn't be national boundaries. Everyone would just be workers, and you would live in I mean, technically, in their perfect world, there'd be a classless state. Everybody would just be comrades. Um, but the defining factor is the class, the worker. So it's the worker rising up against the upper class, regardless of the nationality. While within fascism, your devotion to the state and the state's continued growth is what's more important. And they would allow for religion and private property as long as it didn't interfere with the state. So as long as your religion didn't say, "Oh, well, I can't go fight this war," it's like, no, that's not good enough. Because there's what's the term, conscientious objectors, due to religion or whatever. I sure hope that muted, because I know this microphone is really loud. Okay, so, I'm looking at the book. I'm like, wait, that's not right. So, let's see. I don't know how far back I want to go, because Dinglebutt here will get in the way, won't you, Otto? Yes, she will. You're a doofus. So, Italy. Now, I mentioned that Italy was part of the, not Central Powers. Central Powers? Yeah. During World War One, but they switched halfway through to the Entente. Triple Alliance, that was it. But they switched to the Entente halfway through. However, they were angry that the Versailles Treaty hadn't given them more. So Italian communists began strikes in March of 1919. So we had right and left wing thugs taking violence to the streets and against opposing party leaders. So we had basically fascists and communists just going to town against each other. Now, Benito Mussolini was once a socialist. See, I can't talk today. And I even have my water today. Reorganized the Arditi into the black shirts, and they were the fascist shock troops. So they did the violence. He was charismatic, very good at giving speeches and rallying the crowd. By October 1922, staged a march on Rome. The king quickly capitulated and made Mussolini prime minister. So, hey, you want to get a elected position, just march on the capital. And if you've taken my previous course, my 103 course, you know that marching on Rome is a time-honored tradition. So he named himself the Leader, Il Duce, very creative. In 26, he had the Pope sign the Lateran Accords in 29, which legitimized him, or his rise to power, rather, and gave the Church Vatican City. So once again, the Catholic Church gets land through questionable means. Like to this day, Vatican City exists because of the fascists. Alright. There's all Mussolini. Now, obviously, though, the big thing we're going to talk about is Germany. Yeah. So, violence in Berlin and Munich was so bad that the people who were trying to put together a new German government actually had to move to the Saxon town of Weimar. So here they created a liberal democratic constitution, which instituted a president, a prime minister, and a parliament. Parliament being called the Reichstag. A lot of nationalists, though, saw the Weimar Republic as being full of traitors. They believed this stab in the back myth, saying Germany was not defeated on the battlefield, but by greedy prospectors and Jews, because, of course, who signed a treaty for their own gain. because as I mentioned last time, the Kaiser and generals never actually admitted defeat. It was the chancellor who signed a treaty to spare Germany any more destruction. Oh, great. Um, so we had groups from both the left and the right fighting openly in the streets. Um, Although the socialists were typically outdone by the rightist groups such as the Free Corps, um, who were usually ignored by the authorities because they were more concerned uh, with the communists than they were the fascists. Because we can't have the communists here. So there's the old Reichstag. Uh, the Weimar Mark was devalued uh, drastically over and over due to the economic pressures in Europe following the Great War. Now, what this means is the purchasing power of the mark continued to decrease um, as time went on. So, uh, in 1918, it was 4 marks to the American dollar. In 1921, it was 75. In 1922, it was 7,000. And at the same time, they still had to pay reparations, which was in American dollars. So, what that means is while the reparations technically isn't going up, what the Germans have to pay in their German currency is. So due to this hyperinflation just making things worse, um, they temporarily suspended the reparations. The French occupied the Ruhr mining district in 1923, which is where a lot of Germany's resources come from. The miners were told to put down their tools and not produce for the French, which made things almost spark another conflict. The mark. What the heck? Why is. The mark continued to rapidly devalue. Huh. 160,000 to the dollar in June 1923. 1 million by August. Um, People were buying food after being paid immediately before the currency dropped again. And by November, it was 1.3 trillion to the dollar. Um, People bartering for food and supplies, and I mean, I can't even imagine it being that bad. I know when I was in Ireland, um, when I was there, obviously they were using euros, and as they still are today. Um, the euro is about maybe $1.20 to the euro today. Um, when I was there, it was a little bit stronger. Um, Maybe $1.30 to the euro. And I want to say it went up while I was there. And just a couple of dimes, like just like 10 cent, 20 cent worth over the course of a couple of months. Because I was there for about 4 months. Just like 10, 20, 30 cent to the dollar difference. Like I could feel it. I'm like, oh geez, this is gonna make going to the grocery store more expensive. This is gonna make food more expensive. Um, like it doesn't really change price wise in euros, but since I've got since I'm still technically converting it over from dollars. So I mean, this sort of thing is just, I mean, yeah. By the time it was at 1.3 trillion, people were just like, we're not going to use money anymore because it's worthless. Um, we're just going to barter. I mean, if you've got 5 apples and you want to trade it for, bread. I mean, I guess that's the value now. That's, oh, I don't know why that, it's gone now. Okay. Anyway, uh, actually born in Austria, or the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the time, Adolf Hitler was refused admission to both art school and the Imperial Army. He had some kind of medical issue, or either he was just not seen as being very physically strong. Um, he was taken in by a Bavarian regiment, delivered messages between trenches, and by the end of the war, he believed in the stab in the back myth. So he joined the German Workers' Party in 1919. Became the which became the National Socialist Workers' Party, or NSDAP, which is this big. Do I have it here in the book? Um, no, it's this big German word. Uh, National Socialist Deutschland. I don't know what the A is. Um, Also, don't be dumb. Um, like I've seen people be dumb. Socialist in here does not mean communist. Does not mean socialism. It's it's just part of the name. I mean, there's literally a terrorist group in Ireland that was called the Friendly Farmers Union, and they literally would like use car bombs on British checkpoints. So let's not conflate too much meaning to the names, please. So can't hear my mouth. I wonder why. They appealed to former soldiers. They were not afraid of violence, and they developed their own version of the black shirts, the Stormtroopers, or the SA. So violence. That's always a good thing. They recruited heavily in Bavaria, and with hyperinflation and Hitler's speeches, they were able to recruit more quickly. So there, of course, is Hitler. I think, yeah, I've got this awful gift that I found many years ago. Ugh, why did I do this to myself? Excuse me. Right. By November, Hitler's like, well, Mussolini marched on Rome and everything went fine for him, so let's do that. So they surrounded a beer hall in Munich on November 8th and kidnapped the governor of Bavaria. It's like, hey, let's kidnap the governor and he'll join us and everything will be fine. That didn't happen. The Bavarian army put down the uprising, and Hitler was in jail for 8 months, where he wrote his semi-autobiography, Mein Kampf, um, where he articulated his various ideas about Nazism. Let's see. So while this was happening, the Weimar Republic was actually stabilizing thanks to the Dawes Plan coming from America. Um, the French left the Ruhr territory, and the Germans were given American loans to pay the French and British, who could then pay that to the Americans. And it's this weird roundabout system, sort of a snake eating itself. Um, because the money is being given to the Germans to pay the French. The American money is being given to the Germans to pay the French and the British to pay the Americans. But then the Germans end up owing the Americans. And, like, I get that the idea was that the Germans will also use part of that money to build their economy back up so that they can stabilize, so they can, start producing and be able to pay America back later with their own economy. But it's still a weird circular system. So there's the boys. Oops. So, the stuff going on in Italy and Germany were not exceptional. Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, Yugoslavia, and Czechoslovakia all were chafing under the peace treaties, um, pushing for more land and trying to maintain some amount of ethnic purity. So there was lots of short and incredible violence, attempting to have nationalism by groups that didn't have a nation. So lots of people were left, as we said, without a nation, wandering into new countries without any kind of identification papers. So the League of Nations were creating the Nansen Passport to allow these nationalist people to settle, but this still didn't really help the impoverished countries that were absorbing more people. This is a okay. So moving on. So this idea of nationalism and ethnic determination were, one and the same. Uh, there was an increased interest in health, both the physical and the spiritual, of the people. The women who had gone to work during the Great War were expected to return home and rear strong children, and the men were encouraged to be physically strong as well because, strong children. The ideal men began to resemble the classical Greek and Roman statues, and therefore the working class, rather than the usually short, rotund, and plain-looking politicians who usually were the ones actually that had the power and were running everything. Got an email? Is that no? Okay. So there's a bit of propaganda there. A suave German soldier. It's not live there. Artists were pushing to create more. We're pushing more to create new and unique things. Yeah, Picasso and Kandinsky, who already had new trends before the war, further pushed the envelope. Also, housing. Countries worked on simple, cost efficient housing plans, and the Soviet Union created these of public kitchens and nurseries. I'll show you that in a moment. It's sort of like, I know that the dorm I was in Ireland, we each just like had a room. Um, there were two bathrooms in the hall. There were five of us. There were two bathrooms, and then like a common room they called it, which was where the kitchen was, and then just sort of a big open area with a couple of couches and a TV that barely worked. But it was like that's where you would go and socialize with the people in your area, so you wouldn't just be like, you know, in your living space and not ever interact with anybody. Uh, this also, the Great War led to existentialism, the individual's own perception as to what was real, and due to the chaos of the Great War, this idea of enlightened knowledge was very much dead. Um, the Great War really jaded pretty much the entire continent. However, there was still an attempt by a lot of people to try and just forget all of this. I mean, this was the Roaring Twenties. Um, well, at least in America, new forms of music such as jazz, film and radio. There was magazines and comic books that changed society, at least for the middle class, in a big way. I believe this is Kandinsky. I honestly don't get it. It's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, there's something going on. It's not just like Pollock splattering paint on a canvas. There's actually angles and color separation, and like he's doing something with it. I don't know what he's doing, but there's something happening here. And then USSR living spaces, um, quite quite bleak. Brutalist is the term used today to describe Soviet architecture. So then everything went to hell. October 29th, 1929, the U.S. stock market crashed, um, which stopped the loans into Europe, which is to say Germany. Um, these countries devalued their currencies and set up trade barriers to try and stabilize everything, which made wages fall, unemployment rose. Uh, the people who kept their jobs consumed less because their wages were falling, so it was everything was more expensive. So the economy was weakened even more. It was the failure of the Kredenstalt, the biggest bank in Austria, that really set the Great Depression in Europe into motion. Um, German banks truly fell apart. On September 21st, Great Britain devalued the pound and set up tariffs, which spelled the end of free trade in Europe. And again, over in the USSR, they're just like, this doesn't affect us at all. countries were scrambling to get off the gold standard, while the common man was just like, hey, whatever y'all can do to make the economy work so we can eat would be great. Otto's found a bug. So obviously in Germany they were hit hardest by the Depression. We're trying to find a way to fix things. Now, Paul von Hindenburg was elected president in 1925, but he was just a war hero who didn't know much about politics. So they wanted him to elect a chancellor to fix things. He appointed many, but they all failed, and eventually appointed Adolf Hitler on January 30th. Now, he saw Hitler as somebody that could get things done, and then he could easily kick them out of power, and this went about as well as it did for Sieyès back when we were talking about Napoleon. And for those of you that took my previous class, the same with Caesar. Hitler was seen as one of the little people. He wasn't a noble or really an officer in the war. But he did have a lot of little people behind him, which is to say, a lot of the German population. So there's old Hindenburg. So within the first 2 years of chancellorship, Hitler was consolidating power. Hermann Goring was the Prussian Minister of the Interior, rounding up enemies of the party. Heinrich Himmler expanded the SS, or the Schlussenstaffen, the security guards. March 1933, Hitler was able to get Hjalmar Schacht, an economist put in charge of the Reichsbank, to get the German economy back, and Joseph Goebbels, who was the Minister of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda. So Goebbels was in charge of a lot of important stuff. Stock was remarkable, but beyond him, none of them were highborn or remarkable in a way that would have allowed them to rise to a high position prior to the Great War. As I said, the Great War really evened the playing field and wiped things out in a way that allowed people with skill to rise to a position of authority. So the SA members began harassing Jews, trade union bosses, and communists to secure Nazi power. It was a Dutch communist, though, that tried to set power to the Reichstag. Well, the Reichstag chambers, not the people. He didn't try to just set everybody on fire. That allowed Hitler to seize emergency power. He then passed the Enabling Act that gave all power to the executive branch. There's a lot of question whether this Dutch communist was legit, but regardless. Enemies of the state were arrested, sent to detention camps. Leftist books and other material were burned in huge bonfires, which is to say anything that's against Nazism What are you running from, you chicken? My cat is such a baby. Germans were put to work on large projects, such as the Autobahns and housing developments. Everyone was guaranteed a wage, if low. But the main focus on recovering the economy was rearmament. They were getting that military back. Help him, Toru. He's dumb. So there's Hitler breaking the ground at the Autobahn. Get him. And there that picture is again used in a nice big propaganda poster. Make it look like he's actually working out there with everybody. And there's a Nazi motorcade. And the Autobahn is what inspired the interstate system. So, the SA, though, was getting out of hand, even for Hitler. And Ernst Röhm was suggesting merging the SA with the regular military, which I guess would make him the leader of the military, and Hitler didn't want that. So he ordered the Gestapo and the SS to destroy the SA. So over the course of 3 days, they quietly murdered Röhm and 90 supporters. Now, this caused quite a bit of outrage even within the party. However, Goebbels was able to quiet things down with internal propaganda rather. And then the Nuremberg rally later that fall that was filmed by the famous filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl emphasized the unity of the Nazi Party because, propaganda. Okay, it is still alive. Now, the Nuremberg laws, set of laws was for the protection of, quote, the German blood and German honor. It was, of course, just a bunch of anti-Semitic crap. It argued for the, quote, biological ancestry of a Jewish man or woman and set aside for the pure Aryan race, which we'll talk about later. Jews were considered stateless in Nazi Germany, so all of their rights as German citizens were taken away. If they had more than 2 Jewish grandparents and couldn't prove Aryan heritage, they were labeled a Jew, regardless of whatever religion they might have. Because, again, racism. Oops, that's it for that. I wish I had a picture for the Nuremberg rally. It's quite large. It uses a lot of new and interesting techniques for filmmaking. So, Mussolini figured that Hitler's rise to power was a sign that he would also maintain his stability. So in 1935, he decided to go back to Ethiopia and have his revenge for Italy's defeat in 1896. They used saturation bombing and chemical weapons, killing tens of thousands of Ethiopians while 3,000 Italian soldiers were killed. I still don't know how you managed to lose 3,000 Italian soldiers when you're using saturation bombing. 1936. Italy and Germany signed the Rome-Berlin Axis Pact as a sign of fascist solidarity. and also signed the Anti-Comintern Pact, which Japan also signed. So we had the, well, actually not quite. Hold on. So we had the main core of the Axis powers, but actually the rest of them come in a little bit later. Yeah, because Japan is very anti-communist, so they're all about that. All right. Also, the Spanish Civil War. Um, they had a republic for a little while. It was overturned in 23 by Miguel Primo de Rivera. Set up a military dictatorship to get rid of corruption. 1930, though, there was still lots of corruption. Um, so he resigned for King Alfonso the 13th. So they reestablished the republic. The Constitution, though, broke the power of the church, and many radicals attacked the clergy. Um, the radical left provoked a response from the radical right. Uh, in 36, liberals managed to win the elections, so the right-wing groups responded by attempting a coup, and we had a civil war. Both sides got outside support, though the right under Generalissimo Francisco Franco won in the end. And that's important because, let me take some water because I'm thirsty and my throat hurts. That's important because Hitler used this as a testing grounds for his Luftwaffe and bombed the hell out of any sort of leftist forces within Spain, as you can see here. And it led to this painting by Picasso, named Guernica. It's the name of the city that was bombed. Now again, for me, modern art, I don't understand it, but since I know what's going on here, I get it better. This is the representation of the people's. I mean, this is just a representation of a night bombing. I mean, if you're, asleep and suddenly there's loud explosions and light and, your house is just being blasted apart and people are dying and animals are running around and you don't know where it's coming from and you don't know what's going on and it's just utter chaos. Yeah, this to me is a good depiction of utter chaos. Um, so yeah, I dig this as far as a depiction uh of that because again, for me, modern art, not my thing. But when I understand what it's trying to depict, um, I can be okay with it. When it's just like a blue, if it's just a canvas and it's blue and it's got a red line across it, it's like this is sadness. I'm like, nah, no, it's not. And finally, the Anschluss. So in Austria, the fascist leader Engelbert Dollfuss tried to maintain Austrian independence from a pan-German movement. So he banned both the Nazi and socialist parties in Austria, but was assassinated by an Austrian Nazi in July of 1934. Um, I should mention that uh, two of the things that Germany was forbidden from doing in the Treaty of Versailles was rearmament and an Anschluss. Anschluss is the joining of Germany and Austria. Um, Hitler, though, did not immediately absorb Austria because Germany was still recovering from the Great Depression. Kurt Schleschnig took over as chancellor, but had to call a vote on Austrian independence on March 13th, 1938. Austrian Nazis staged a coup. German forces moved in through the north on March 12th rather. By March 14th, a 99% majority supported the Anschluss. Really? I don't think you get a 99% majority to support anything. Absorbing Austria into Germany. So there we have Greater Germany, Ostmark down at the bottom, that was Austria. So Germany now is much larger. And don't worry, we'll get back to Czechoslovakia there in the middle. Still alive. Some people were happy about it. Some people were having a good time. So that's chapter 23. Right. On to chapter 24. Because I need to at least get that one started so we can finish it Thursday. This thing has screwed us up. Oh, wait. I need to switch the... There. Alright. What do you want, cat? What? Well, come here. Anyway. Basically, as soon as he became chancellor, Hitler was rearming Germany. Discontinued reparations, began taking lands and goods from Jews, and thanks to Schott, was able to pour lots of money into the buildup of the military. As I said, was something technically wasn't allowed to do, but he also knew the homeland would need food, oil, rubber, and iron, more than what was in Germany. And by 1938, 80% of the Reich spending went into the military. Now here we have the new order he wanted in Europe. The Aryans, Germans, Britons, and Scandinavians on top. The Latin people, French, Spanish, and Italians next, and then the Slavs on the bottom. The Jews just were not in his vision at all. So after the Anschluss, Hitler wanted Sudetenland, which is a bit of territory around Czechoslovakia that had most of the industrial base for the country, and 3 million Germans, which was his excuse. Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister for Britain, Edouard Dadelere, France's Prime Minister, met and flew to Munich to discuss the issue with Hitler. Mussolini came by as well, but people who weren't there were Edouard Benet, the president of Czechoslovakia, the country that was getting its land discussed, and Joseph Stalin, another important player in the area, but, we can't bring the communists along. So Chamberlain listened to Hitler's promise that the Sudetenland would be the last annexation and flew home declaring he had secured peace in our time because, we can't have another war with Germany. And by March of 1939, they had occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia because, of course, they did. So this officially created the Axis powers, which was Germany, Japan, Italy, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. The last three we don't really talk about often, but they were there, and they were part of it. So there is the Sudetenland there on the outside, and there's the rest of Czechoslovakia. There was also some land given to Hungary, also Italy apparently. There was some land annexed by Poland. Weird. And there's Neville Chamberlain having just got off the plane in Britain saying, "Oh, this piece of paper, it brings us peace in our time." And, they all hailed him as a hero until Hitler took the rest of Czechoslovakia, and then he was mocked and derided because it's like, hey, that didn't go so well, did it? However, with the annexation of Sudetenland, Hitler's Germany acquired about 300,000 more Jews. So November 9th, 1938, 15 years after the failed beer hall putsch, Joseph Goebbels, whatever, instigated an empire-wide pogrom. Yes, they burned synagogues, ransacked Jewish businesses, 90 Jews were killed, thousands imprisoned. Though there were internal as well as external protests over it because, obviously. Also at the time, and something that's not as talked about, was a German euthanasia campaign known as T4, where those deemed unfit to reproduce, usually mental patients, were euthanized in order to prevent the spread of unfit genes. Because, if we're going to go full Nazi, we might as well just wipe out everybody. More Germans repatriated from outside countries and pushed the lands that Germany was continuing to annex. This is why it was called Night of the Broken Glass, because a lot of these storefronts had the big plate glass windows, and they were shattered, and there was lots of glass laying out on the street. And also Night of the Burning Synagogues doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well. Do you mind not sticking your butt in my face? So, with Hitler gradually moving east, it was only a matter of time until the Nazi Germany and Communist Russia came into contact. And again, they were more violently opposed than either side was with capitalist democratic groups. So Stalin knew he wasn't ready for such a war because he had just purged his army again, and the USSR wasn't fully industrialized yet, probably because of all the purging. Which a good girl. Um, so on August 23rd, what? 1939. No, don't do that. That's probably loud. Um, Nazi diplomats went to the Soviet Union with a non-aggression pact. Obviously, the rest of the world was very shocked at this. They weren't aware of the special provisions that allow the Soviets to take Finland. No. Eastern Poland and the Baltic states, as long as... No, don't chew on my cord, you asshole. As long as Germany could have Western Poland and Central Europe. So they were already planning on divvying things up once the party got started. So there's Stalin and the Nazi diplomat. And again, even if, you know, I were, say, working for Germany at this time, I'd still be terrified to deal with Stalin in person because, I mean, not that dealing with Hitler in person wouldn't be terrifying too, but Jesus Christ, that man has no soul. And, like, with Hitler, at least, you know, if you're a German and you're working for him, he would see you as, like, you know, oh, well, you're one of his men. But with Stalin, you never know where you stand. Like, I mean, I don't want to compare like who's better or worse. I'm just saying like Stalin's erratic, and Hitler at least like you know where his evil lies, and with Stalin it's just like we're just gonna kill these people. You know, if you're too good at your job, dead. If you're not doing your job good enough, dead. If he doesn't like your country, dead. Anyway, this is a good little cartoon here. Someone is taking someone for a walk here on the eastern frontier, and there's the oil derricks back there for I believe that's Stalingrad. Oh, there's a baby purring. Again, she's sitting in my lap because I've got my book in my lap. Okay. I'm a little bit ahead of my other class, but we'll go ahead and. Oh no, I'm not. We're about 15 minutes. We're gonna do the invasion of Poland and the Winter War. So we'll start World War II. Um, and so this should be a good place to end. So, September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Britain and France declared war, but didn't really do anything. Um, Outnumbered and outgunned Polish had to fight against the German blitzkrieg and fell in less than a month. The Soviets invaded from the east and took a third of the country for themselves. So Poland was split into three provinces: the east for the communists, the central section as a sort of slave colony, and the west was given to Germany as Lebensraum. Lebensraum being living space or living room. Yeah. So there's the German bombers preparing to do their thing. There's the bombing aftermath. Do not chew on my cord, you little asshole. I don't care how cute you are. There's the Germans marching in from the west. Always do that. The Soviets marching in from the east. So there's poor Poland, getting just absolutely battered. So, following the initial forces, the SS moved into Poland, um, and their goal was to purify Western Poland for German occupation. They executed Polish and Polish Jewish leaders, any peasants that tried to resist, and they wiped out any mental institutions. Why do you have to get up when I'm trying to pet you? You're a little shit. Uh, the Soviet side was typically worse. There was the Katyn Forest Massacre. 20,000 Polish officers, teachers, and businessmen were rounded up, shot, and dumped into a mass grave. Until 1990, this was blamed on the Nazis until the Soviet Union fell and we had access to Soviet files and realized, oh no, this was the Soviets. Excuse me. However, this also meant that a large Jewish population was integrated into Germany following the absorption of Poland. Now, they couldn't be deported. There was an attempt to send them all to Madagascar, but Britain owned the ocean, so that couldn't be done. Most were put into tiny, filthy, and overcrowded ghettos. The Warsaw Ghetto was one of the most famous and most brutal. Now, of course, this was before the actual concentration camps, but I mean, these little overcrowded areas were gonna kill people anyway. So there's the Katyn mass grave after being dug back up and the bodies are decomposed. And real quickly, the Winter War. November 30th, 1939, Stalin figured, hey, Finland managed to survive as a democracy between World War One and this war we're now doing. Let's go kick their butts. And he decided to start a war, start the invasion in the winter. Yeah, that was a good idea. Over the course of 3 months, the Finns lost 27,000 troops, while the Soviets lost 258,000. Because while the Soviets are, well, the Russians are known for, retreating into Russia and letting winter do its thing, the Finnish, I don't think they can feel cold. So, like, they're even better at that. Yeah, they completely wiped out the Soviets. However, the Russians had many more troops rather, and eventually were victorious on March 12th. Finnish, though, were stubborn, are stubborn. 420,000 fled the country and reopened the war by June of the next year. So there's some Finnish in their little snow machine gun nest. I feel like George Lucas particularly liked this part of World War II because, like, the first Star Wars, the original Star Wars trilogy is just World War II. Anyway, I feel like he in particular really liked this part of the war. It's like, I'm gonna make an entire part of one of my movies just the Winter War, and that's why we got Hoth. But we'll talk about Norway and the Enigma Code next time. Um, yeah, because it's gonna be Europe and Northern Africa and the Enigma Code and Britain and lots of stuff. So, um, there's still lots to do. God, there's so much to do. We'll hopefully get through it next time. So, um, a couple of things before we finish. Before, um, well, I mean, I figure if you guys are here, you've probably seen my emails. I've got, I've got your last test and papers graded. If you sent them in, some people didn't send them in. Some people who did send them in and I didn't see them, or either I did see them but I wasn't able to access them, and I was like, oh, I'll get back to this later, and then I didn't. I forgot to because I got a million other things happening. Um, I'll, most of you got back to me about that, and we got it fixed, so you know who you are. Don't worry about it. It should be updated on Blackboard. Um, Test 3 is up on Blackboard now. You have until next Monday to finish it. Again, please choose 4 things to answer. Give me 2 to 3 paragraphs as to why you chose the answer you chose for each one. Um, Send that back to me via email, preferably Word document. Same for the paper that's due next Monday. Um, the updated syllabus is up on Blackboard with the standard the standard topic. You're free to do other stuff if you'd like. Um, that's 2 to 3 pages. Send that to me by next Monday uh, via email, preferably just like a Word document. Um, a PDF is fine too, because I can just grab that or print that out. The whole uh, sh- shared file Google Docs thing doesn't always work because it tries to make me access it through my Gmail account, but my Gmail account is not my FMU account, and it doesn't recognize me, and is the thing. So yeah, preferably not through Google Docs. Some of them have worked fine, but preferably just attach a, a Word document if you can. Um, and then the final exam, which is going to be the last chapter in this chapter, and that'll be it, because obviously that's all we're going to have. Um, I'm going to change that test around uh, as best I can and get that ready for you guys for next week, because that's exam week. Which will be next Wednesday through the following Tuesday, I think. It's like it's like almost a 2 week thing, and so I'm gonna just give you guys that whole time to get it done, but you have to get it to me by the end of that period, because I have to have grades submitted by that following Wednesday. So get that shit to me, please. Um what else? Oh, next Tuesday, a week from today, is reading day, which is usually when Francis Marion students, like, we have a day off between Monday, which is the last day of classes for Monday students, and Wednesday, which is the first day of exams. That Tuesday is used for, like, last minute studying, or normally um, going up to campus and, like, if you have any questions to ask the professor. Obviously, we can't do that. So what I'm gonna do is either try to get up and, like, have my email up, so if you guys have any questions, um, while I'm sitting here, like, grading your stuff, since you guys will have hopefully just sent that stuff in for me, or um, but what's the words I was gonna use? Oh, or, like, just be streaming something, maybe playing a game or something that I've got, and have my uh, stream up on the side here like I usually do, so I can have my chat. So if you guys have any questions, you can just hit me up live, and I can respond to you verbally and immediately that way, um, if you want to do that. So, I don't know. This is a weird semester. We're making it up as we go. Um, I I had no forewarning, no kind of, like, hey, if you ever need to teach online, here's what we're gonna do. I don't know if anyone else is actually using YouTube. I think we're other professors are doing a lot of different stuff. Um, but this is what I was gonna try. So here we are. Luckily, I've attempted to stream stupid video game bullshit before in the past, so I've got a little bit of knowledge on how some of this works. Um, so that's all I've got. Uh, yeah. So, I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Unless you guys got any questions before I go. I'm choking because my throat is being dry. Unless you guys have any questions, yeah, that'll that'll do it. Um, I don't have anything else. It's 11:16 now, so class is done. Um, yeah, if hopefully I'll manage to knock out the rest of the material on Tuesday. Um, I was hoping to have a little extra time so I could go over the Atomic Cafe and talk a little bit about the Cold War, but I don't think that's gonna happen. Oh well. Yeah, y'all take care, and I'll see y'all Tuesday. And let's see if I can do this. Yeah. See y'all later. Bye.